It's Jess from MHYT, and welcome to another episode of Chicken Chat. Today I have Tessa with me. Hey, Tessa.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
Very good.
Awesome. So today I was thinking, let's talk about turkeys.
Hey, that's perfect. This is a great time of year to talk about turkeys. We've got kids that are getting ready to go to fair. We've got all these spring chicks coming, but poults, they get a little bit more attention. So this is a good time to talk about them.
Absolutely. So I know I've raised heritage turkeys. Have you raised turkeys before?
Yes, but only broad-breasted. I haven't done heritage.
All right. So do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with raising the broad-breasted turkeys?
Sure. So broad-breasted turkeys are a lot like Cornish in the meat world. So they are small when they get there, and then really fast they grow, and they are kind of silly. They're a little bit different than chickens. So we had 3, and that was enough. They needed a lot of attention when they were babies. I remember them being in their brooder, and when we would leave the room, they would cry, which was adorable, but also like, please stop. But the broad-breasted turkeys, you know, we're looking for a certain weight. So they're not something that's going to stay at your farm for a very long time. They are going to get to a certain weight, and then they go off to be processed. Mm-hmm. So making sure you have the right kind of housing for them is important, because they aren't going to be with you for that long. That's where a lot of temporary housing is really good to have, which is kind of what we did. They are great because with turkeys, like saying you can only have 3, that's the reason why we only did 3, is because that's the minimum that you can get. And we weren't exactly sure what this process was going to be like, or if we would like doing it. So our first batch was just 3. And when you think about having a broad-breasted turkey, it can be a lot more economical for your farm to have it that way, to do it like that. If you see, sometimes you'll have in where I live, sometimes farmers will put their heritage turkeys for sale around Thanksgiving time. And they're really expensive. And I've noticed this past Thanksgiving, the turkeys, they were way more expensive than they have been in the past couple of years. So having those turkeys grown at home was more economical for us, so that we weren't buying something from the store, but we also weren't dedicating a year and a half, 2 years to a bird so that we could have it for Thanksgiving. So we had ours for about, it was on the low end. I remember we processed them early because I didn't time it right. We got them way too early, and then we kind of ran out of space. So it's one of those things where you need to prepare to have the room for some big birds, because they go from poult to tom like that. Even though they might have the brain of a baby, they are big, and they're inquisitive, and they are super curious. But we did it during COVID, and it was actually kind of cute, because they would come out. We would do our homework like on the grass outside with my girls. Yeah. And we have pictures where the turkeys came over, and they were like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And it's just cute, because, you know, they were just so inquisitive. But it was a good experience, though I would like to try heritage someday, just because of that, like, inquisitive nature. It would be nice to keep them as a staple on the farm, not just somebody that we have to say goodbye to.
Right, exactly. So are there any points that someone should keep in mind when they want to raise broad-breasted turkeys?
Sure. One of the reasons why I would prefer to do heritage next time is because you can't have broad-breasted at your home and like have them lay eggs and then keep repopulating. So it's something where you would always have to be ordering poults, and which actually isn't so bad if you think about the cost of a poult, as opposed to keeping a breeding pair on farm all the time. But they can't breed on their own. So you're always going to be having to order. But that's not so bad. I actually didn't mind that. Yeah. They do get really big really fast, though. So they outgrew their brooder, which I had been using for chicks. way faster than I anticipated. We had to make some kind of makeshift like dome out of chicken wire across the top of their brooder when we had it inside, because they would jump up on top of the waterer and then jump out of it was a 4 foot tall. So we would come in and there was one who would just be sitting there like, hi. So they get big fast. They really do. So make sure you have space for them.
Right. Well, it definitely sounds interesting. Like I said, I haven't done the broad-breasted yet, so maybe someday I'll give them a try.
Maybe someday.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I should probably share a little bit about my heritage turkey adventure, which was, it started with really good intentions and turned up to something a little bit interesting. So I raised mine, the year of COVID. Yeah. So as you know, and I've talked about in the past, my coop is mostly Bantams. So it was a little crazy to think that I was going to add turkeys. I was going to add turkeys to my coop. And because the Heritage have a higher minimum, I actually split an order with somebody. So I received 10 turkeys to start with. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was going all in on this turkey adventure. So
I think so.
10 Heritage turkeys. And as soon as we received them, we knew that they were going to be so much different than the chicks. They were super inquisitive, like you said. They are a bit mischievous. They like to find their way out of the brooder. I remember finding one where we brood. We have like a table next to it where all of our supplies are. We found one of them on the table one day. We have no idea how it got out of the brooder, but we loved, it was hard to keep track of them sometimes, but we also loved it because they were more interactive than our chicks were. Our chicks, they come home, they get under the brooder plate, and you don't see them until they get a little bit, a couple days older. But the turkeys, they were like, oh yeah, they reminds me of that book, Are You My Mother? I mean, that's how they were just like, oh hi. And they loved my husband. My husband would hold them and they were just looking at them. So they were really interesting. And just like the broad-breasted, they did grow fast. They don't grow as fast as the broad-breasted, but I did have these moments where I was like, oh, you're getting much bigger than I thought of. And we did have to do a lot of temporary housing for them because again, I knew that I was going to need space, but I didn't realize how much space I was going to need. So we did a lot of like building their coop kind of on the go, and finding places for them. When they were all full size, we actually built them almost like a tractor setup. And it made cleanup so much easier. If anybody's ever raised turkeys, they can get a little stinky. So just like our meat birds and so forth. So having that tractor setup was really easy. When they got to full size, it was very interesting. My friends would tease me and they would say, well, go hold one of those because you always hold your Bantams, go pick up a turkey. And, they were like, size would be, and I'll put a picture up on the screen here so you can see how big they got.
Yeah.
So it was just very funny for me to see a bird that was that big. So the intention was that we were going to raise these for meat and we were going to have them for Thanksgiving, but I became attached to them. In a way, I was like, I don't know if I can eat these this year because it was my first time doing the Heritage turkeys and they are like puppies. The Heritage turkeys, they're like that big dog that doesn't understand its size. Like they follow you everywhere. Every time I turned around, there was a turkey at the back of my leg watching me. We had one that was obsessed with my gloves and she would take them. I would set my gloves down. I turn around. She had taken them and she would go hide them in the coop. I mean, they were just
she's playing fetch.
Exactly.
You didn't want to play fetch with your turkey.
It was so funny. Cleo, we called her. She would grab my glove and go bury it in the back of in their coop, like in the back of the tractor. I'm like, what are you doing? It was fun to watch them come out of their coop. Because they were in the tractor, but then we would let them kind of range during the day. And it was fun to watch them like fly out of the coop. And so what I ended up doing at the end of the season is I ended up selling 8 of them off to somebody that was going to keep them for a breeding program. And then we ended up keeping 2. We had Clyde and Cleo for a couple of years, and Clyde thought he was a Bantam. He would go sit, he would try to sit on your lap. He would try to he would go in the coop with the Bantams, and you know how Bantams are always, my Silkies, they're always broody.
On the floor.
Yeah. So he would go sit with them like in the, in the area back there. And they were quite the experience. That is for sure. They lived here for a few years, and then we had a big coop expansion. We had to change kind of our setup, how things get every couple years, you got to change everything. So they ended up moving up the road to a friend of ours, and we got to see their progress up there. And it was a really fun experience. I definitely want to add turkeys again, knowing what I know now. It's just finding the right time for us, and building the right coop. Right now we've got all the Bantams and we've got the ducks, and so eventually I'll add them back. But I did love that. I loved listening to the gobble. I don't know if that was like my favorite. It was like just go out there and just they gobble back and forth. That was just funny. And it was such like the gobble was such like a whole body experience. And I remember watching Clyde, and it was just like he pulled it from the inside of his turkey body and made it come out. So so they were definitely a lot of fun. People raise the heritage because they're hardy. These were hardy birds. I live in Northeast Ohio in the snow belt. We didn't have any problems going into the cold with them. Clyde and Cleo were here for a couple winters with no issues at all. So the snow and the cold did not faze them. They do have the ability to breed. So if you add heritage to your farm, you're going to have that, ability to continue on your flock there.
Which is nice. That is nice to be able to determine what, you get the eggs. Do you want to try incubating them?
Exactly.
Or letting your turkey sit? That's a neat thing to have with heritage that you don't get with broad-breasted.
Right, exactly. Like our Cornish cross and our Rangers, I kind of think of that, the Cornish cross is like the broad-breasted, the Ranger is like the heritage. A lot of people like that heritage turkey flavor. And you hear that with the Rangers as well. So I wonder too, I know with costs are rising right now, so I know the turkeys were more expensive this past year, but I do wonder sometimes too, people charge a little bit extra for the heritage because of the time that's invested. It's going to take a while for them to grow to the right size for processing. And they do have that different flavor with them. So but yeah, they were a lot of fun. It was, sometimes I'm like, oh, I want Clyde back, and then I'm like,
no,
I don't know if I want that big nothing's more interesting than bending down to pick something up and a turkey face being like right here.
Right, I bet he came up to your hip.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I'm short, so my turkeys were very big compared to me. So yeah, awesome.
That's funny.
Yep. So the turkeys, we talked a little bit about, we both mentioned that turkeys needed a little bit of extra love when it came to brooding them. So do you want to talk a little bit about brooding the turkeys?
Sure. So I did not anticipate how fast they would grow. I used the same brooder that I would have used with my chicks. They were good in there for probably only 2 weeks, whereas a lot of times with the chicks, I can keep them in there for a good 4 to 6 weeks before I really have a lot of trouble. So we kind of had to scramble to make additions to this brooder because it was the first time that we had grown them. And I did it in March, and it just so happened that COVID year, it was really cold. So we couldn't put them outside when we wanted them to, or when I maybe anticipated we would be able to, just because it was so cold. And even though their body grows fast, it's kind of like a Cornish where they don't get all their feathers that quickly. So we clean out that brooder really good from the chicks because turkeys can be susceptible to a lot of things that chickens aren't. And that's why a lot of times it's suggested that you don't keep your chickens and your turkeys together. So if you're using the same brooder, get that 10% bleach solution, clean it really well. You don't want anything to get into their systems because turkeys are super fragile. Everyone told me up front, like, expect to lose a third of your birds, which when you only have 3, that's kind of scary because it's like, well, that's a third of my birds. But there is a reason they say that, and it's because turkeys, like in the wild or heritage turkeys, they stay with their mom for a good 6 months. So get the brooder box ready. You get the pine shavings in. I personally used a brooder plate. What did you use for heat?
Brooder plate.
Now, did you find that like you had it all the way up to the top real fast? Yeah,
absolutely.
We did too. Yep.
Yeah, and encourage them. I had to encourage them a couple times under that. The heat's over here. The heat's over here. Way more than the chickens. That's one thing that surprised me, was that the turkeys, they needed some extra help in the beginning. They
did.
They were like they wanted to misbehave and they got confused easily. So there was a lot of like coaxing them under the heat source. And did you have to remind yours where the food and water was?
Oh my gosh, all the time. This was the first time that I actually put marbles in the water so that there was something shiny for them to peck at, because I was terrified that they weren't going to eat and drink. It would be like the same thing with the heater. They were looking to me like, well, we would just like to sit with you, mother. But that's not my job. So you need to go in there and do that. But so we did the marbles in the water so it was shiny for them. And then we put multiple places of food around for them. So with the broad-breasted, it's a little bit different, the feed, because it's like you're growing Cornish. So for those first 8 weeks, you really do have to have a turkey starter or a game bird feed that has the high protein because they grow so fast. So you're looking at like 27% to 30%. Anything lower than that, and they're not going to be able to grow to where you want them to. And then just moving forward with the broad-breasted, once they're at like 8 weeks and they're outside, switch them over to that turkey grower feed. That's the one that helps fatten them up. And I know that's different for heritage, right?
Yeah, the heritage, for about weeks 1 to 6, you're at about a 28% starter feed. So they still need all that protein because they are growing quickly, but it's a little bit of a slower rate. And then kind of similar to like our chickens, there you bring that protein down after that the week 6 to week 20. You're at about a 20% turkey grower feed. And then from 5 months on, you're at a 17% finisher or maintenance type of feed. But yeah, a little bit different, but not too different. So
not too bad. But you know, it really is an experience that I would do again. I would love to try heritage turkeys because we really did bond with these birds. And it's something where like I have pictures of my kids like blowing bubbles for the turkeys and they would chase them. And raising them indoors that year, like sometimes the broad-breasted they would call for the girls, like they would call for them. I could hear them in there like, mother. And that experience, if you normally raise chickens and you're the type that likes to cuddle with your birds, maybe turkeys is your next step. Because you really can be more hands-on, but just be ready for that to be like giant fast.
It's like I said, like the big dog that thinks it's really small. It is such a rewarding experience. I definitely will raise them again someday after we do some upgrades and some adjustments. But yeah, such a fun experience. And every time I think of Clyde, I get a good laugh. So it was definitely a lot of fun. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. We hope we gave you some insight into raising turkeys and maybe some inspiration to get some turkeys of your own. Be sure to check our description below for some different links to help you on your turkey research adventure. And I think there's something else in the description, right, Tessa?
Yes.
Something to help with shopping.
You should always use the code. If you decide to plan your next batch of turkeys, be sure to use our code, which is MHYT, for $5 off that order.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.